Chapter 12. In Labours Oft. As a result of God's blessing resting on his ministry in Anglesey, Christmas Evans's influence among the churches became very great. He was a pastor of pastors, in fact, a bishop in the modern sense of the word, and his labours were incessant. There were the societies under his care, the meeting houses to be built, the funds to be found, the cases of discipline to be dealt with, the pastors to be set apart to work with him. Most of the ministers were men still in business, with their own domestic affairs, and needing much help and guidance from their better known and esteemed colleague. In all the various gatherings he was automatically the president, and some of the meetings were very primitive. As well they might be in this raw state of society. There was no Mr. Evans. He was Christmas Evans to his face and behind his back. Yet with all this, affectionate familiarity did not give way to lack of respect. Christmas Evans was able to hold his post as moderator with dignity without losing the love of his brethren. Order was maintained with William, "You have spoken before, be done," or Richard, "You have forgotten the question before the meeting, be silent." In fact, a visiting minister from South Wales, who wished to impress by his eloquence, was silenced with, "Sit down, David, sit down." The meetings of the association in Anglesey were times of great joy and encouragement to him. Great was his concern that in no way the Lord's holy name might be dishonoured. Religious politicians on the island were very jealous of each other, and the poor Baptists were suspected of being disloyal to the crown, even called Jacobins. It is said that so concerned was Christmas Evans lest any fuel should be added to inflame this groundless rumour that he would kneel on the platform near to the minister who opened the association in prayer, and remind him if he omitted to pray for the King, George III, and the royal family. So the name of Calvinistic Baptist became respected and esteemed in North Wales. He was also at times involved in controversy. When the practice of believers' baptism was assailed in a book by Peter Williams of Werne, which caused a great stir in Wales, he answered in a book with the strange title, "Sarah and her son casting out the bondmaid and her son." Also he wrote very strongly on the doctrine of particular redemption, 1811. This being necessitated by the inroads of the Wesleyans into North Wales. Later, he published a book, Redemption Within the Circle of Election. In a letter to a Welsh magazine, he thus epitomized his own theology. The reader will find all my views in the epistles of Paul and in Dr. Owen's Death of Death, the classic defense of particular redemption. He was never rich. £30 a year, 57.5 pence a week, was the most he ever received till leaving Anglesey. Yet the record is that he was given to hospitality, amazingly so, many passers-by staying at his house, while he constantly contributed his sovereign or half-sovereign to some worthy cause. If presented with a new suit, he would often give it away. Truly it can be said of him, as poor, yet making many rich, as having nothing, and yet possessing all things. His wife Catherine was a wonderful help. Of her spiritual outlook, her husband wrote that she had a deep sense of corruption and of the utter impossibility of her salvation by deeds of the law, and the indispensable necessity in order to acceptance before God of the merits of Christ and their imputation to the soul through faith in his righteousness. She had very elevated views of the sacrifice of Christ, which was her rock and strong tower. It appears that she was rich in faith and possessed a calm, quiet, practical mind. Hers was often a lonely life in the solitary cottage, no hint of luxury intruding, and her husband often away. It seems a strange feature of the Welsh chapels of the time that though they so dearly loved sermons and almost idolized preachers, yet they did little to help with the daily comforts of their ministers. For the most part, Christmas Evans was content with his life of poverty, though it was recorded that on one occasion his soul was filled with righteous indignation. After the hearers had spoken of the wonderful sermon, he was informed he would be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. Yes, yes, no doubt of that, was the reply, but I have to live till I get there. And what of my poor old white horse? That needs to be fed now. For my horse there will be no resurrection. But all this worked for good. Wales never possessed a more unselfish or humbler Christian. His one concern was for the honour and glory of God. His own personal appearance he was unconcerned. It is in fact recorded that on one occasion Catherine had, with some difficulty, succeeded in supplying her husband with a new hat. Travelling to preach soon afterwards, his horse needed water, and coming to a brook, he was at a loss for a bucket. What could be done? The only thing seemed to be to use the new hat. It is no wonder that on his return home, Catherine was amazed at his worsened condition. On another occasion, he returned home without his best coat, having given it to an Irish tramp. Yet, with all this, there was no loss of dignity. He possessed the true dignity which the grace of God gives. He had a presence, nearly 6 foot tall, finely proportioned. His whole bearing was dignified and majestic, and did not depend on outward adornment. One who knew him well applied to him the words of the psalm: "All thy garments smell of myrrh, aloes, and cassia," the sweet savour of Christ. He was a man of prayer. We read of his being in earnest prayer throughout the whole of a 10-mile journey. For many years he was accustomed to retire for prayer 3 times a day, and also to rise for prayer at midnight. He wrestled with God in prayer, both for his subject in preaching and for God's blessing to attend. He prayed his way through trials and out of them. He prayed even for his enemies in their trials in an eminent degree. He possessed a forgiving spirit, and he knew what answers to prayer were. So he was a wrestling Jacob. He writes, "Christ, according to the riches of his grace, gave me a fresh spirit of prayer, with a special enjoyment of his presence, until I became a prince in the confidence that the Lord Jesus was in alliance with me, as Jacob felt before he went to meet his brother Esau, whose anger he greatly feared. No, Esau succeeded against me, though he might come with 400 armed men."